Winner here will complete the 4-0 in the first leg of the tournament. Adrian Sullivan over on your right, a longtime Magic author, recently picked up, I believe in the last year, his first Pro Tour top 8. And he'll start on Swamp into Lantern of Insight. Shows Liliana of the Veil and Glimmer Void. So it's these early turns where Adrian has to be very careful.
Yes. You want to get the important cards out of your hand as quickly as possible so they don't get stripped by a discard spell.
Yeah, and you see Adrian, a veteran player here, he's going to take notes on the cards he knows about. So there's a Liliana of the Veil already in Tim's hand. Tim does have a turn 1 Noble Hierarch.
Noble is one of the few outs to active Ensnaring Bridge, and also on turn 1 it just accelerates your mana.
Yeah, Adrian could get... Does have to be aware, I was going to say, of that Liliana on turn 2. Adrian does have Collective Brutality. He'll escalate it once. So Noble Hierarch gets -2/-2, and Adrian will attempt to take a card from Tim's hand. And it looks like he'll get a hit, I guess.
He'll get this Path to Exile that wasn't going to do anything against his deck. Remember, Brutality only finds instants and sorceries as much as he would love to take that Planeswalker Liliana of the Veil.
Yeah. And Lantern, you see Adrian's going to keep track of this. So Path is gone. Tim's hand is lands, Scavenging Ooze, and Liliana.
Though it's likely that Adrian was pretty happy to discard that land from his hand anyway.
Right.
He wants to get into a position pretty quickly where he has Ensnaring Bridges and no cards in his hand.
Scavenging Ooze is both a clock for Tim, and it actually can disrupt the Codex Shredder part of the deck. Now, rather than making Scavenging Ooze, you see here, Tim decided to play a Windswept Heath and left that fetch land up.
Well, he's wisely respecting the Collective Brutality sitting right on top of Adrian's deck. Adrian was kind enough to show him that with the Lantern of Insight.
Okay.
You want to be able to activate that Scooze immediately, get the Noble Hierarch out of your graveyard, make it a 3/3 so you can't kill it with the Brutality. Now, this all is for nothing if Adrian's able to assemble a quick Ensnaring Bridge. As you see, one is now on the top of his deck.
Right. That Ensnaring Bridge is one of the key pieces here for Adrian's defensive plan. And he'll use Ancient Stirrings to draw it immediately. You have his choice. Look, we know there's a bridge on top for other cards. Adrian might be looking elsewhere. Actually, it's going to be Ghoul Caller's Bell that he takes. So, Ensnaring Bridge on the bottom of his deck.
Yeah, Bell is a nice find. It's likely that he's looking for one of the 2 copies of Pithing Needle in his main deck. He wants to shut off that Liliana of the Veil.
And he'll cast the Bell. Says go. Ancient Stirrings on Adrian's deck, Thoughtseize on Tim's. Tim goes ahead and draws the Thoughtseize. He could have cracked a fetch land to try to shuffle it away. Now there's an Abrupt Decay on top of his deck, and that's going to make things interesting.
Yeah, that is a nice one. Adrian likely going to want to ring that one away with the Ghoul Caller's Bell.
Yeah. If Tim cracks the fetch land to make Liliana here, Adrian won't have to. And because of that, it looks like Tim will just fire off Thoughtseize.
And honestly, the Thoughtseize is pretty exciting here. Adrian just saw a Ensnaring Bridge on the top of his deck and cast Ancient Stirrings anyway.
Right.
That is indicative that his hand might be powerful, though it looks like the case was that Adrian was just looking for something else.
Yeah, his last card is a copy of Inventor's Fair. And with Ancient Stirrings on top of Adrian's deck, he's not too far away from just finding a bridge and immediately casting it.
And Inventor's Fair becomes pretty close to Demonic Tutor in Adrian's deck. Well, I guess Diabolic Tutor is a more similar once he gets another artifact on the battlefield.
Finds him any card. Not technically any card, but the cards he cares about are all artifacts.
Right. Your Pithing Needles, your Ensnaring Bridges, the stuff that generally this deck would actually tutor for.
So just a tap land for Tim, and he says go. Draw is another Stirrings from Adrian. He'll cast it, see if he can find that Ensnaring Bridge. Looks 5 cards in.
And frankly, there's no huge rush to find the bridge, given the Inventor's Fair.
Yeah, Tim has really taken his time here. As you see, Adrian finds Codex Shredder. He'll make that. So now with the Shredder, he has 3 artifacts. So Inventor's Fair is online. He has a Lantern with 2 mill controls. This is a very good spot for Adrian. And he'll start by milling away the Abrupt Decay.
That was a pretty nice exchange. Adrian had redundant legendary land on top of his deck. Meanwhile, Tim had that Abrupt Decay that was going to matter. Adrian doesn't want to draw a second Inventor's Fair, doesn't want to face down Abrupt Decay. That works out pretty well. Tim was then showing Liliana the Veil, which he fetches away, not really looking for a second copy of that one. And we're still in the upkeep, so Tim will draw whatever he flips over. Well, Adrian will have priority with his Codex Shredder as well. So,
right, it's mentioned there was that Abrupt Decay on top of Tim's deck, so Adrian's going to mill that. Another Liliana. We'll see if Adrian will likely let him have that one.
Given that Tim shuffled it away the first time he saw it.
Yeah.
If Adrian milled that, one of them would be wrong.
Yeah. And we'll see, is it Scavenging Ooze or Liliana Tim wants to make? Looks like it's going to be Liliana. That'll come into play. +1 gets rid of a land. And Tim plays a land and says go. So he's hoping to get that Liliana up to ultimate before Adrian finds a Pithing Needle. And that's actually a tough one to do here.
Yeah, especially given that Adrian's top card is Ancient Stirrings, the best cantrip still legal in the format.
And Codex Shredder will mill the Tarmogoyf. Yeah, 2 main deck Pithing Needles. And so here's Ancient Stirrings. We'll see what Adrian can find with it. Looks like Pithing Needle is in the top 5.
Adrian's main deck also includes 2 copies of Abrupt Decay. Of course, you can't find that one off the Stirrings, but ultimating the Liliana is a bit of a tall order against this deck.
Yeah, and Adrian will find the Needle. So he keeps, really the game is just Adrian playing defense. Needle on Liliana of the Veil. Eventually he's going to try to shut down each of Tim's threats.
And this is a stage in the game where Tim has to start evaluating what his odds of actually winning are. You don't want to find yourself in a position where you have the resources to win game in 2 and 3, but you don't have the time.
Here's Scavenging Ooze from Tim. He'll leave up some green mana. Now, between that Shambling Vent and the Scavenging Ooze, it makes sense that Tim will want to keep playing at least until Adrian finds an Ensnaring Bridge. You see, and that last Ancient Stirrings on top for Adrian, though, is a great draw for him.
Well, also Adrian just needs to really find 1 more mana, then he can use the Inventor's Fair to find the bridge anyway.
Yeah, grabs Codex Shredder off the Stirrings. Adrian actually at 22 right now, thanks to that Inventor's Fair as well. Plays another Shredder. There's a Shredder on top of his deck. Things look to be going Adrian's way.
You do run into an interesting gameplay element about this deck versus the round clock when your opponent is playing a drawn-out game 1. It's usually technically correct to Shredder and Bell relatively conservatively. Look for the big ones that you want to mill. Make sure you're actually controlling your opponent's draw step. But if you're being forced to play the game, sometimes you just have to really actively, aggressively use these things when you don't necessarily want to.
See Tim uses Scavenging Ooze to eat away 2 creatures. Brings it up to a 4/4. Right, so Adrian's line's pretty clear here. He finds a bridge or finds another mana to go get the bridge, casts it, and then continues to mill away Tim's cards. Now, Lingering Souls was drawn by Tim here, and that one actually is pretty good in this situation.
Yeah, those creatures are free to attack for the immediate future. Generates a good amount of power.
And it's not something Adrian can just mill.
Right. You mill it over, he'll at least be able to flash it back for 2 spirit tokens. Adrian does still have a lot of time to play with, however, at 22, gaining a life every turn until that Inventor's Fair has to be sacrificed.
Right. Tarmogoyf attacks for 4. Tim may just cast and flash back those Lingering Souls. That's exactly what he's going to do. 5 mana makes 4 1/1s.
The options he was looking at were really do this or attack with Shambling Vents. This has higher potential upside.
Yeah, both players will mill from the Bell. Surgical Extraction, Adrian will mill his own card and get rid of an Inquisition. So in Adrian's spot, he's looking for an Ensnaring Bridge or an untapped mana source.
Yep.
Codex Shredder will mill him, and there's Ensnaring Bridge.
That'll
He'll draw that one. Bridge in play. Creatures with power greater than the number of cards in Adrian's hand may no longer attack. Adrian has no cards in hand, and that's unlikely to change soon.
Creatures with power can't attack. And this is really where Tim is asking himself, am I actually still playing this game?
Yeah, this is the lock here. The idea is that Adrian will never draw any cards. He'll keep himself empty-handed, and for the cards that could make a 0-power creature or maybe destroy Ensnaring Bridge, Adrian is going to mill those so that Tim never draws one. And eventually, you'll get a board where, if you're wondering how Adrian wins from that point, eventually, what will happen is Adrian will start using the Codex Shredders to just mill Tim's library faster.
And with 2 Codex Shredder and Ghoul Caller's Bell, not to mention the Lantern itself as a last-ditch effort, it's going to be very difficult for Tim to top deck a relevant card whatsoever. Not to mention that the Inventor's Fair, that still represents backup and Ensnaring Bridge. Tim's problems are many.
Interesting note, we have talked to some Lantern pilots here. In this situation, one of the things that they'll talk about is percentage equity on milling your opponent. So the idea is, how safe do you want to be? So like Adrian could use this opportunity to just mill Tim for 1 extra, right? It's not technically necessary. The safest way to play it is to basically never mill your opponent, but it takes forever.
Right.
Fortunately for Adrian, he doesn't have to make that decision. He draws a copy of Girapur Aether Grid, which actually gives him an alternate way to win. This is the enchantment from Magic Origins that lets him tap 2 artifacts to deal 1 damage at any time. So rather than milling Tim, what he'll do is he won't mill him at all, and then on end step, he'll just deal some amount of damage.
Currently, Adrian has 6 artifacts on the battlefield, a veritable insectile aberration, though a little bit better than that against Lingering Souls, I suppose.
Insectile okay, yeah, the flipped Delver. That's Crucible of Worlds, the draw from Adrian. He'll play a Blooming Marsh.
What a powerful play.
Tapped,
that one going to be in the deck more to synergize with the 2 Ghost Quarters. Not so much just the lands that he mills, though technical upside.
You see Adrian's not dealing damage just yet. Now he'll do 3 more. Tim down to 12. A backup Ensnaring Bridge on top of Adrian's deck. This is looking to be locked up here for Adrian Sullivan.
Yeah, no realistic way in terms of gameplay for Adrian to actually lose from here. It's mostly just a matter of time and execution, and Adrian has not demonstrated that he's going to mess this up. You know, he's been playing Pro Tours for multiple decades now, I believe. If you were coming up in the Midwest area, you couldn't go to a PTQ without bumping into Adrian Sullivan. And frequently you'd see him in the top 8.
Or without his coin bumping into you.
You'd certainly hear his coin. Famous in the area for using a giant novelty, was it a penny or a nickel? I think it's a penny.
Penny.
To flip to determine who goes first. And I tell you, it's allowed.
On Tim's end step, Adrian continues to count artifacts as Girapur Aether Grid shoots Tim down to 7. 1 more turn should actually do it here. Damage on end step, untap, finish it off. Adrian will play a bell, says go. He knows the draw from Tim, it's just another land. That's going to do it.
And Adrian says, you know, I'm going to do this. On my turn, I'm going to do this again.
Looks good from my side.
I've seen every card you've drawn. I believe that you have both no legal game actions or relevant cards.
Yep, 4 damage on end step. Adrian's going to untap. Tim's at 3. Draws that Abrupt Decay and make it 3 more. Well, he's going to decay the Scavenging Ooze. Okay, that's what we were caring about. Maybe it doesn't. He does need 1 more turn.
Sure. Life gain a relevant factor.
There we go. So game 1 goes to Lantern Control, piloted by Adrian Sullivan. A quick one at that, just 20 minutes for Adrian to get the win.
I imagine he'll win the overwhelming majority of game ones in this kind of matchup. Things do change a little bit with the sideboards.
Right. Okay. So one of the issues here is that Tim's deck is first of all, isn't fast. It can't just present threats to end the game quickly. And then when we get to the part of the game where Adrian has to start milling Tim's cards, there are a lot of blanks in the deck. So those are two problems that Tim wants to address. Let's look at the sideboard and whether he has ways to do that.
He has some slam dunks, he has some okay ones. So let's look at all the cards first. 3 Fulminator Mage, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Stony Silence, a Lost Legacy, a Maelstrom Pulse, a Damnation, a Thrun the Last Troll, a Collective Brutality, a Nihil Spellbomb, a Feed the Clan, and an Engineered Explosives. So you have some slam dunks. You have Stony Silence and Engineered Explosives. They don't really play well together, but both of them will do a lot of damage.
Yeah, Adrian's deck is mostly 1 mana cards, so Engineered Explosives seems pretty good. And Stony Silence is just a knockout punch.
There's some argument for Surgical Extraction. If you can get 1 bridge off the table, you can solve them all. That can pretty easily be converted into a game win in conjunction with Thoughtseize Inquisition of Kozilek. That one probably comes in also likely because the main deck has 3 Path to Exiles, 3 Fatal Push, some Lilianas that are marginal, Collective Brutality, just a lot of stuff coming out.
There's so many cards that are weak here that we might see a lot of the sideboard. So even things like Nihil Spellbomb, Maelstrom Pulse. How do you even feel about Fulminator Mage?
That was a card I was going to go to.
Yeah.
And that actually would have potentially been relevant in that first game with the Inventor's Fair being the tool to find the bridge.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you can deny Adrian the bridge. Now, Adrian never actually had to use the fair to do that, but point still taken.
If you ask me straight up, would I rather have Fatal Push or Gray Ogre in my deck? I'm easily going to take Gray Ogre in this matchup, even though it doesn't really do very much. So we go over to Sullivan's side. We have 2 Welding Jar, 2 Grafdigger's Cage, a Padim, Council of Innovation, a Magus of the Moon, a Leyline of Sanctity, an Abrupt Decay, a Collective Brutality, Nature's Claim, Seal of Primordium, Spellskite, Gaddock Teague, Phyrexian Metamorph, Pithing Needle. Needle seems fine, though it's not terribly exciting.
I want to put Padim in the deck.
Padim giving your artifacts hexproof.
I guess
that's a nice thing. I think Welding Jar is a little bit better than Padim, honestly. That's a great 0-mana answer to Abrupt Decay. Magus of the Moon actually seems pretty powerful here. A lot of non-basics in the Abzan deck.
I guess Tim doesn't blow up artifacts much. He's just really trying to Stony Silence them.
So Seal of Primordium, that one's going to probably be Adrian's best sideboard card.
Well, if you're worried about Stony Silence, Padim protects it when Welding Jar protects your bridge when Welding Jar doesn't.
Sure. Yeah, you can still set up bridge even if you're under Stony Silence.
Yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to see how he sideboards here. I could see some arguments for a lot of these cards.
Yeah, there's a good mix of options here.
All right, so the players are going to get ready for a second game. Now, with our Season 1 Invitational, this marks the end of the first season here on the SCG Tour in 2017. But in just 2 weeks, we'll be starting Season 2, and we now have the schedule for you, so you can. It's online. We're going to go ahead and go through it here as we get to our second Invitational, which will be 6 months from now. It will be in December. So in just 2 weeks, we will be in Cincinnati, where we'll be playing our Standard Open. This is actually new Standard, so it'll be with Hour of Devastation, the first premier tournament where you can use those cards. Now, this tournament, it's exciting. We're going to be covering it. This is often like the flag bearer for the new format.
Yes, you're going to see a lot of new archetypes breaking out. Really powerful set, it looks like, in Hour of Devastation.
All right, the following week, we'll have our first of 2 team-constructed events in Atlanta. That means Modern, Standard, and Legacy. You'll need a team of 3 to play that event. It's our first time being really in the South for that format, so being excited to bring the new format to that area. We'll be taking a break, then we return to Syracuse for a Modern Open, Richmond a week later for a Modern Open, Louisville as well for Modern. So we have 3 Modern Opens in a row, and then we take a break before we play some Standard in Dallas. We go back to Charlotte for Modern as well. Return to Cincinnati for Modern Open. We have October, our Legacy Open. We take a break for the regional championships, and then we finish the season with a second Team Open in Baltimore before we have our Season 2 Invitational weekend.
A lot of great Magic to be played, a lot of stops. The 2 team events definitely really exciting. Excited to both cover and hopefully have the opportunity to play the second Team Open in this season.
All right, so for Season 2, this means we also have playmats. These are given away for entering the appropriate Classic or from the Open for the weekend or in the Infinite Challenge package. So depending on the format, you get a different playmat all season long. For Standard, it's going to be the Invocation Art of Bantu the Glorified. This is the Black God from Amonkhet. For Modern events, we'll be giving away the art for the Invocation of Spell Pierce here. I believe that's Kefnet in the art?
Yes. Only bird god I know anyway.
And then in Legacy, it will be the Invocation Art of Days. So all these from Amonkhet, they'll be given away at all Opens and Classics all season long. So your first chance to get them will be 2 weeks from now in Cincinnati.
Really great pieces here. I do take issue with that being the art for the card Days specifically. Give me the Dizzy Gerard any day of the week. You know, the old Nemesis Days. I think this is a little busy for what Days should be.
It feels like it's should be Flusterstorm.
Yeah, I would dig that as Flusterstorm.
Because there's a bunch of birds.
Yeah, it's like a storm of birds. Bird storm.
Both players on 6 cards here for a second game. I was going to say both these decks actually are fairly mulligan friendly. Abzan, its cards are pound for pound so good that 6 of them can be enough. For Lantern, as long as it has a Ghoul Caller's Bell and a Lantern of Insight, you don't need all that much else.
You don't need to make too many land drops. Your deck is extremely redundant.
Everything costs 1. And we're underway here for the second game. Winner of this will get to be undefeated going into the standard rounds. See Lantern of Insight turn 1 again from Adrian Sullivan. Land on top for Tim and a Inquisition on top for Adrian. By playing turn 1 Lantern into Tim's fetch land, it actually helped Tim make a more educated decision here.
Yeah. Got to choose whether he wanted to fetch that one away.
This isn't the kind of matchup where you need to end step, get your shock lands to preserve your life total.
Yeah, frequently there'll be a good enough reason to wait on your fetch land.
And so I guess, do you want to draw planes? No. Okay. So it's like Tim got a scry out of the deal.
The thing is that generally won't get less true as the game progresses. Not to mention that Adrian doesn't want to have his Lantern thought seized away.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, Tim didn't have it immediately, but even still.
Looks like Lingering Souls on top for Tim, so that's certainly an upgrade. I see he'll play another fetch land. His new top card is Noble Hierarch. Or check, that's going to be Blooming Marsh. But here is Stony Silence from Tim. This is, I would say, the most important card out of his sideboard.
And here's the card that Adrian wished that he had on turn 1.
Yeah, Inquisition of Kozilek will show Tarmogoyf, Lingering Souls, Gavony Township, and then we have an Invocation in Tim's hand. And those are always fun because they kind of just look like invocations.
That's very gold. It's got to be an invention, right?
Invention.
It's an artifact. It's got to be an artifact.
Oh, so you're right. You're right. It's a masterpiece, not an invocation.
Yeah.
This is engineered explosives.
All right. So that made it. I used context clues to solve the riddle.
Expedition, masterpiece, invocation. Yeah, okay. But that is gone. The explosives are gone. That's what Adrian chooses to take. And Tim draws Noble Hierarch. Because right now, players are just going to draw the top cards. There's no Ghoul Caller's Bell effect yet in play for Adrian. And even if there were, wouldn't do much.
Could use that Ghost Core to try to get Tim to shuffle, but that's mighty aggressive. There would have to be something mighty powerful hanging out.
So, and I actually think there's an interesting strategy here that happened from Adrian's side. So he chose to take Stony Silence.
Engineered explosives with the...
No, Engineered Explosives with a Stony Silence in play, which Engineered Explosives wasn't going to do anything.
Yeah, it doesn't actually have an activated ability anymore with the Stony Silence on the battlefield. It suggests that Adrian's plan involves destroying the Stony Silence.
Yeah, he's saying, okay, first of all, if I don't blow up the Stony Silence, I'm never winning.
Right.
So he's playing as though he's going to draw Abrupt Decay.
Abrupt Decay, Seal of Primordium, there's Abrupt Decay.
I guess it wasn't as though he was going to draw Abrupt Decay. He just had it. That makes a ton more sense.
And this discard spell, seeing 2 bridges into land is
far
from ideal.
One, and the land is Academy Ruins. Now, there's no blue mana in play for Adrian. But you're right. So the Thoughtseize from Tim Chesnakas takes 1 of Adrian's 2 Ensnaring Bridges.
Also relevantly, Adrian's deck, no basic island. He does have that Ghost Quarter, just Forest Swamp for basics.
Okay, so he can't use the Ghost Quarter to get the island for Academy Ruins.
Right. But I think he's okay with that.
Takes some damage off Lingering Souls. Tim makes 2 more, passes the turn. And it's Ensnaring Bridge from Adrian. Plays second Ghost Quarter, so Tim still knows his hand is just another land. One card in hand for Adrian, so at least one more attack is going to get in. After that, we're not sure. Tarmogoyf, Noble Hierarch in Tim's hand. Here's a swing of 4. Sullivan will go to 14. And you'd mentioned this before. There's actually a neat interaction here with Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, so fun thing about Ensnaring Bridge, it just checks as you attack. Noble Hierarch has an ability called Exalted. It gives a creature, if it's attacking alone, +1/+1. So you take your 0 power creature, you're able to attack because Adrian has 0 cards in hand. That's fine. You don't have any power. Then you just get +1. Takes a long time, a little death of a thousand stings action.
Like looks like a 14-turn clock. I guess 13. On the last turn, Tim can use Gavany Township.
Yeah.
It's real good.
And Adrian doesn't have a way to control Tim's draws just yet.
No, draws Thoughtseize. Now, an Ancient Stirrings is coming up for Adrian. That's going to be a real nice one. As Thoughtseize takes a card from Tim's hand.
Collective Brutality can actually make Adrian lose life, so that's upside.
Yeah. It's interesting because Adrian, I don't think, would have cast the Thoughtseize if it weren't for the fact that he needs to be empty-handed every turn.
And it did work out to be life neutral, actually, because he took Collective Brutality.
Another land from Tim, a swing for 1 of Noble Hierarch, and Tarmogoyf. Both players empty-handed now. Adrian will cast Ancient Stirrings. We'll see the top 5. Academy Ruins in play for Adrian. No blue mana just yet. Crucible of Worlds is what Adrian's going to get. Okay, there are 2 Ghost Quarters in play. And Padim. Yeah, that has come in out of the sideboard. Tim has to read that one. It's on top of Adrian's deck.
That's one that I expect most opponents have to read, even though it is standard legal.
All right, so all of Adrian's artifacts will have hexproof. That second ability, that's actually going to work here too. If Adrian controls the creature with the highest converted mana cost, he'll get an extra card each turn.
Honestly, he's kind of against that. He doesn't want to draw 2 lands.
Yeah, you're not sure if he wants to get the extra card.
That's kind of downside.
Yeah, I agree. Problem is he has to cast the Padim. So instead, it's shuffled away.
Yeah, I wouldn't be super on board with that one.
Yeah. Attack for 1. Adrian's down to 10. Tim's still empty-handed.
And now with Adrian with so many Ghost Quarters, the ability to crack these 2, start playing them out of the graveyard, you're actually kind of getting to the point where the first couple should cause Tim to shuffle his deck, or at some point.
All right, basic land count. What are we at on Tim's side?
All right, so his deck, he has 2 Swamps, a Forest, and a Plain, so he is a little bit heavy on this. The thing is, Adrian doesn't really have much in the way of alternative options.
Looks like Adrian right now is going to use the Ghost Quarters to Ghost Quarter himself. He's using them as shuffle effects.
Sure, this does make sense. He does want to find some specific things here.
Yeah.
Particularly answering that Noble Hierarch will have to happen eventually.
Yeah.
He also wants to find a bell to control Tim's draws.
And there we go. So he found Glimmervoid was his draw for the turn, and it looks like this Codex Shredder on top of Adrian's deck is just about what he wanted.
Tim picks up Surgical Extraction, so he can force Adrian to shuffle his deck now. Not to mention deal with some problematic card. We're pretty far from those Ghost Quarters really mattering.
Yeah, Adrian draws Codex Shredder. He'll cast it. And now the lock is being assembled again. Adrian is at 9 from these Noble Hierarch hits, and those can add up. Make that 8. Though I think with a card like Inventor's Fair, since that's been printed, this like chip shot damage plan works far less of the time.
Yes. Yeah, with only 1 Noble Hierarch, you're just breaking even every turn.
Does Adrian want to draw Padim? Looks like the answer was yes.
Yeah, at the very least, he took it over shreddering himself there.
Yeah. And he'll cast the 1/4 here from Kaladesh. So Adrian's artifacts have hexproof. And Adrian will draw 2 cards a turn. And you mentioned you're not sure if that is a good or a bad thing.
It's going to be turns where it's excellent. There's going to be turns where it's awkward.
It's also a blocker for Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's nice. And giving, actually, you know what I'm in? Giving Ensnaring Bridge hexproof on this board is really strong.
You certainly don't want Tim to destroy that one and then Alpha Strike you.
Right.
And now that he has a Shredder, he has a little bit of control over what he draws anyway.
Yeah, he starts to mill Tim here. Thought sees Tim's next draw. Adrian will draw 1 land. Did he draw 2? No, he drew a Lantern of Insight. Great.
Yep, that one's fine.
I mean, you have to remember what Adrian Sullivan's deck does not have very many lands in it. It's a 17 land deck. So at this point, if you look at his in play, he has 8 lands in play. It looks like he's got another 3 in the graveyard. That's only, if you're talking about what happens if he draws 2 lands, there's only 4 in his deck.
Yeah, percentages are pretty small on that one happening. Especially now that he has a backup Lantern, which he can use to shuffle if he has to, and the Codex Shredder in play. So the downside is like kind of marginal, unlikely, and now...
Well, oh, there's even a better thing. Say he draws the first land as the bonus card, right? And then he sees another land on top. He could Academy Ruins an artifact on top of his deck before the second draw step.
Sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Backup Ensnaring Bridge from Adrian Sullivan. It looks like he's going to get this one as well, and it's really showing off the strength of the matchup on Adrian's side, winning it through Stony Silence. It was a turn 2 Stony Silence into a turn 3 4-power play from Tim. This is about as good as he's going to do in the matchup, and it just didn't convert.
Tim also drew Engineered Explosives. Of course, Adrian did solve that with a discard spell, but that's just one of many tools available to the deck.
Yeah, Tim's draw in this matchup was above average, and he was on the play. Still is not going to be enough.
It's really the spot that this deck operates in. It exists to beat up on a lot of these 3-color mid-range decks. And honestly, Lantern Control is a deck that actually continues to pick up pieces, as we see in Venture's Fair, Padim.
We did the fact that we just had a Artifacts Matters set. That was good for Lantern Control.
Yes.
Stony Silence. Adrian's not going to give him that one. No, and this deck, strategically, it's a really neat deck. It's hard to say that there's another deck that's similar to it in any other format. There are prison decks, but the way this deck establishes a prison deck is pretty unique.
Yeah, this is the deck that I would say is kind of the hallmark of the modern format in the sense that
it's just
you
weird.
didn't see other things. A lot of decks like this is a different version of a standard deck, a legacy deck, what have you. This is a modern deck.
This is just, this is doing its own thing. Adrian playing a Pithing Needle. That one's on Engineered Explosives. This one all but over. I think some of the charm out of it for me also comes when the scrappy wins. We see a lot of these prison wins. As someone who's played Valakut, I've had games where they just milled 5 mountains.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, hold on.
Personally, I've cast a lot of
it's really nice
commands in Modern. I haven't had too much trouble beating the Lantern Control deck.
No, traditional Jund is generally considered to be this deck's hardest matchup. We don't see that much traditional Jund, but I would think the fact that both Grixis Shadow and Jund Shadow are Kolaghan's command decks, those are strikes against Lantern Control right now.
Counter spells are pretty powerful against the deck as well.
Yeah, Grixis, I mean, Lantern's very powerful because this deck is so close to the ground. A lot of 0/1 mana plays. It can win its bad matchups. That's really a testament to the deck. That said, a deck like Grixis full of Stubborn Denial, Thoughtseize, and Kolaghan's Command, that's going to be among the harder ones.
Yes. One of the cards in the format that's particularly hard to beat is Ancient Grudge, just because you can't mill it with the Codex Shredder and have it do nothing.
Snapcaster Mage is actually also a really problem card here.
That lines up on kind of multiple fronts too. It can flashback Kolaghan's Command. Sometimes it's just another Lightning Bolt.
If you so if you're playing against this deck and your play is Kolaghan's Command, blowing up an artifact, buying back my Snapcaster Mage, that's really problematic.
It's nice.
But Lantern's great, and even then, I wouldn't be surprised if Adrian had already beaten Shadow once today.
Certainly winnable.
One of the things I like about it is it's a Mox Opal deck, and I think Mox Opal may be the most powerful card in Modern, as far as what it does.
There's an argument for that.
Yeah, it's a little limited in the decks you can play it in, but I would say I think it's Very reasonable to say every deck that plays it will say it's their best card.
If everybody could play it, it would be banned automatically. You know,
Yeah.
you can't play Krill Mox in this format, and
Right.
that is certainly justified.
Right, Mox Opal is the best card in Affinity, for sure. It's probably the best card in Lantern.
Yep.
It's the best card in KCI. And it makes the whole KCI combo impossible, actually.
Would you say that it is the best card in Cheerios? You think it's better than Retrace and SRAM?
It's Retract.
Retract, right. My apologies if I offended any Cheerios players.
No, I mean, it's Mox Opal.
Yeah.
If Mox Opal was banned, then Cheerios would just be completely unplayable.
So nothing would change.
I don't know what you mean. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of any other Mox Opal decks.
It's hard to play. It's really unique, but the decks it's in are great.
I actually think it's a card that is a matter of when for vintage restriction as well.
I mean, it's a Mox.
If you show up with enough decks, you start seeing more and more where it's just a second Mox Sapphire. That's a problem.
So in the meantime, Adrian has established 2 Lanterns of Insight, 3 Codex Shredders, 3 Ensnaring Bridges, a Ghoul Caller's Bell, a Pithing Needle on something that Tim doesn't even have left in his deck, a Crucible of Worlds, something under the Crucible of Worlds, a ley line, a white ley line.
In sporting events, they refer to this as garbage time.
So you can't target Adrian, you can't target Adrian's permanence, you also can't use the abilities of your cards.
Really just running up the
Can't
score.
attack. Adrian's gaining some life off a land, so that's nice. Is this Phyrexian Metamorph? That's another Codex Shredder. Metamorph's pretty sweet.
Now we got a really fast mill clock going.
Yeah, and if you're wondering how the Lantern deck wins, this would be the answer. They get to this point, and then eventually they just start milling you.
Yep.
Super exciting.
Just riveting gameplay from this point. I will say I do enjoy the early turns of this deck.
It's really fun.
If I was Tim and I was a little bit hungry, sign me up for conceding this match. Easy call.
Adrian will continue to shred through Tim's cards. This is where you talk about the percentages. It's, how many. It's technically incorrect to, mill any of Tim's cards.
Yep.
You should count your deck, count his, and then say, oh, well, once yours is bigger, then you just don't do anything. Fortunately, Adrian's giving away some time by milling.
Just spewing equity, really.
I had that problem when I played the deck, because I would start winning, and then I would be like, I could mill you. I don't think I need to, and I just wouldn't, and then I wouldn't, and then I would go to time, and I'd be like, this is why I can't play this.
Yeah. This deck takes a long time to learn how to play proficiently as well.
Yeah.
Because you're not playing anything like you ever played before. Everything you're kind of learning for the first time, even though you're technically playing the same game. It would take me months to evaluate mulligans with this deck, I'm sure of it. I would want to mulligan every hand because all of my cards are Lantern of Insights and Codex Shredder.
Part of me wants to just pick up a copy of the deck and then play nothing but it for 2 years. And then I could see it.
Those would likely be the worst 2 years of my life.
Or the best. If you just are like, oh, this deck's so good. I'm kind of in the Joe Lissette school of thought here. I have my most fun at Magic when I just kind of pick one archetype and then just know I'm playing it at every tournament, rain or shine. I get into that.
I get that as well, but I do take some time selecting that deck. You don't just select the first thing that's hit. This is the one. No one's forcing you to play this deck.
It's like I find the deck that I think's the most fun. I'm like, I don't really know why I'd play something else.
Yeah, there is some of that for me, but this is pretty far. So on the Venn diagram of things that are Lantern control and things that are fun, it really just looks like 2 pie charts.
Yeah.
There's no overlap in those categories for me. I don't know that I've ever cast an Ensnaring Bridge.
kind of into play any kind of Grixis, right?
I do enjoy Grixis.
Do you enjoy it when it's bad?
I've played it when it's bad. I don't enjoy losing per se, but the answer to your question is close to yes. It's yes adjacent.
I enjoy combo decks even when they're bad. I'll be like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm 2-2, but this is great. Like, can you win? I'm like, yeah, probably not. Because and they're like, why not? I'm like, well, because I'm going to lose 2 more rounds today also. It's just, my deck's not any good, but it's not.
So
I'm having a blast.
The thing about being into Grixis is it's really hard to enjoy when you're losing. Because at least when you're playing a combo deck, you like win the odd game. You're like, well, that was sweet. A couple weeks ago, I picked up the Hall of the Banded Lord devoted druid combo deck. And
nice.
I won 2 games. And
nice.
Those
that
were really
land
fun.
is so bad. But I see what you're doing. Oh, goodness.
Like, the games I won were super fun, but like with Grixis, it's like, what happened? They played creatures and I had kill spells and I lost and it was horrible, you know? Like, there's no fun happening. It's all about the scoreboard. But like with wonky combo decks, it can be fun.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you get a couple on the day and you call it a win.
Going 1-3 at regionals with Pure Steel Paladin was a really fun time.
Yeah. Took me some time to find those Hall of the Banded Lords. I'm going to say that too. Not a readily available card.
All right, so an update here. There are 20 cards in Tim's library to 14 in Adrian's. So at some point here, what we're going to see, I imagine, is Adrian is going to start using. So all his mill cards mill both players with the exception of Codex Shredder. It's why you see that fanned out stack in the middle is all of Adrian's Codex Shredders plus Metamorph on Codex Shredder. It's for this exact spot.
Well, you know what else is for this spot is that Academy Ruins that Adrian's had since turn 0 of this game.
Well, he does have Padim, so that.
Sure.
He
can't activate that twice in a turn.
Padim's not a May. Academy Ruins is legendary.
Sure.
So you're right. If there's no Padim in play, then Adrian could just wouldn't mill.
I suppose he doesn't really have a way to get rid of his own Padim either.
You can't abrupt decay it. Looking at if he has a Gear per Aether Grid still in, he could shoot it. I don't think he does. Look, that was his WinCon game 1. It looks like it makes sense that he would board it out here as well. Surgical Extraction. Adrian going through Adrian's 14-card deck. And he surgicaled Abrupt Decay, and he actually got 2 more out of Adrian's deck, minus 2 cards in the library.
Game's getting closer.
This is the kind of game, to be fair, that a less experienced pilot, I have seen players while learning Lantern lose these board states because they forgot how to manage their extra card draw, or like this deck is actually not very forgiving at all. I don't think Adrian is going to fall into one of those traps.
Right.
You know, the whole like, oh, I was winning and I had the lock and then oops, I accidentally milled myself. Like, that's actually real when playing this deck.
Adrian did just put off a nice trick there. He cast Ancient Stirrings. Because this card is searching your deck or some concealed cards for a specific requirement you can fail to find.
Right.
Looked at 5 cards, put them on the bottom of his deck in the order that he chose.
Right, because Adrian still has to cast the card he draws every turn, rain or shine, because if he stops doing that, Tim's going to clock him with a bunch of Lingering Souls tokens.
Yep.
And then, like, might double township them. Like, I think Adrian's going to get... You get this spot in Lantern where if you let one attack through, you're getting 1 shot.
Yep. Yeah, plenty of Spirit tokens on the other side of the battlefield.
Right. At least 1 township. A white card here drawn from Adrian, and then a bridge.
Of the Moat. That's
cool.
Could not be more blank.
He's got to cast them all. Yeah, Mags of the Moat and the 4th Ensnaring Bridge. Okay. Tim's going to draw. I think he's out of cards. End step, Adrian's going to mill 1, 2, 3, 4.
Ooh, that one was an invocation.
5. That's the last card in Tim's deck is Siege Rhino. Adrian will draw Stirrings. There is another card under it for Padim, though. Draws Collective Brutality. Casts Stirrings, picks up his 3-card deck, fails to find and shuffles. Collective Brutality, he'll drain Tim for 2. And then he'll mill the last card. It's Siege Rhino. Says go. And game and match go to Adrian Sullivan. He is your winner, 2-0. He finishes the modern rounds undefeated.
And I know a lot of time has passed since the early stages of that game, but if you go back, Tim's hand was excellent in the matchup.
Engineered explosives, stony silence, lingering souls, and the lands to cast them.
He really had everything he could have hoped to draw on, and